My name is Jacob Stoops.
And I'm Jeff Luella.
And you're listening to the Page 2 podcast.
This is our podcast about the people of the SEO industry.
We chronicle the real-life stories, experiences, challenges, and advice from some of the most amazing people in the business. In this episode, we talk with Areej AbuAli, SEO manager at Zoopla and founder of Women in Tech SEO. We discuss how she moved from Egypt to London to study computer engineering and business IT, how that led her to find a passion for technical SEO, her experiences at agencies and why she likes in-house, biggest SEO challenges, and much more. In the news, we talk about Google's news that temporary store closures now won't hurt your search rankings and structured data for COVID-19 announcements, as well as the SEO plotline on Tiger King. Finally, we deep dive into diversity, talk about Areej's experience as a woman in SEO, discuss how she founded the Women in Tech SEO group and turned it into an amazing conference, and discuss advice on how we can gain better gender balance in the industry. So get your popcorn ready as we tell Areej's SEO story and have another great roundtable discussion. Hey everybody, this is Jacob Stoops and you are listening to episode 48 of the Page 2 podcast. We are coming into the train station. We are nearing the end of season 2, which will end at episode 50 later this month. So it's crazy. I can't believe we've made it to 50 episodes to begin with, but I think we're coming up on a much needed break in our hectic schedules. And the voice you heard was my co-host, Mr. Jeff Luella. Jeff, how's it going?
Going good. I mean, spending lots of time with the family. We're now sheltered in place. So I get to enjoy more time sitting behind my computer. As an introvert, that is not a bad thing. So other people in my family are going a little nuts right now, but at the same time, they just went bike riding. I told them to go to a business park because there's no one there. And you can just ride around the business park, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah. So. I would say we're in a similar situation where I work from home, obviously. I think everybody, maybe people know that, maybe they don't. I can't remember if I've said that on the show before, but I work from home. I've been doing it for many years, so I'm used to it. My wife, who is a teacher and working in one of the more highly affected industries, is now working from home and having to do all of her stuff online, which is an incredible challenge for them. And then my son is in first grade, and they're out of school pretty much until the end of May, with the exception of the fact that they're having to do online learning. So my daughter, also a preschooler, is out of school, so we don't want her to miss learning. So we're homeschooling them, and then we've got a 10-month-old coming up on 11 months. So we're going a little crazy, to be honest. And there's no end in sight.
Yeah, we're out of school till August now. So.
Yeah, I never really thought we were going back to school. But let's bring in our guest. So we have a very special guest today, the founder of Tech SEO Women, Mrs. Areej AbuAli. How are you doing, Areej?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me. Really, really excited to be featured on this podcast.
And we're excited to have you. And I feel like I almost just had a very stupid but maybe important gaffe. You're married, right?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, I never know, should I refer to her as Miss, Mrs., just say her name, and then sometimes I get stuck in the middle like you saw right there, and it just makes me completely fall on my face, so I said both. So I was equally offensive and not offensive.
It's okay. Good start. Good start of the show.
Right. Don't worry. I've started off worse. I've definitely mispronounced people's names and been called to the carpet almost immediately, which was like, great, we're 2 minutes into the show. Great start.
Yes.
So we were talking before this, but how are things over in London? I hate to start yet again talking about the impact of COVID-19, but it's really almost impossible not to start with it. So how are things going over there?
Yeah, it's going. We're 10 days in lockdown, official lockdown here in the UK. And with my company, we've been working from home for about 3 weeks now. So just getting adjusted to how things are, and just doing our part in terms of staying at home.
Yeah, that has been the hard part, getting used to kind of a new lifestyle and the idea that it's affecting literally every single person almost on planet Earth, which is almost unlike anything I feel like I've ever seen in my entire life. There's not a single person that is not affected. And those times when you do and are able to get out, I hate to say it like this, but even things like going to the grocery store almost feels a little bit like Russian roulette, where it's a little, just a normal everyday thing is actually a little scary. Like you're walking out and you're going, or at least I'm going. This is how I'm feeling. Like, is today the day that I'm going to go into the grocery store and randomly touch something without knowing it, and 2 days later get sick? So I think that that's the reality that I think everybody's facing, and hearing some of the stories that are coming out and that are, at least in my case, I don't know about your cases, increasingly coming closer and closer to home. It's a little scary. You're hearing stories of people with family members getting sick and passing away and not being able to be in the same room and having to say your goodbyes. And this is incredibly sad. So I'm sorry I'm taking the show here, but it's also pretty real, not being able to say your goodbyes in person and having to do it over like a Skype or a video chat or a Zoom or whatever the case may be. And I just can't, like, I've thought about that. And, I heard also a story of a man, I think I can't remember what state it was in, where he withheld his symptoms to see the birth of his child. And he's now actually being brought up on charges because he withheld his symptoms. And I keep thinking, like, gosh, if I was ever in a situation like that where, God forbid, like one of my kids got sick, I don't know if there would be anything that would be able to stop me from being there. Like, I would have to probably just be physically restrained from being there with them. So that when you hear stories like that, it's hard to not feel sad and empathize, but it's really, in my opinion, it's hard to like understand what those people are going through. And it's hard not to be worried. It's troubling times for sure.
Yeah, and I think we just all have to do our part, right, and stay at home. And I think the one positive out of this is that it kind of feels like a lot of communities are coming much closer together. I barely ever knew my neighbors, and they all started sending notes around, and we now have like a WhatsApp group that we're all in together to kind of help one another out. So I think that's the positive that's kind of coming out of it, is that a lot of communities and neighborhoods are coming together more.
Right, because it affects everybody, and I see the same thing too, where even though it's global, and I do worry about every other country out there, it affects local, with local shutdowns of businesses, and you take for granted on that little shop that you go to pick up cheese or to go pick up any type of supplies that, like, because I like to shop at small shops, they're the ones that are affected the most. I mean, the big guys out there are affected, but they're the ones that are kind of going to they'll be all right at the end, while the little shops that might just be scraping by are the ones that are really having an issue. And I've been trying to do some work for a couple of them, and one is tough getting time, but I realize, like, now that I have like carte blanche to do like an SEO audit for somebody, like, and it's like, how can I make him really quickly and knock them out so I can help as many people as possible? It's been an interesting time, and I've been trying to, like, someone who doesn't know SEO, because I feel like I get hired by people who kind of understand SEO. For someone who has no clue anything about it, it's like, how do I create a deliverable that they're going to understand and not just have like like, here's a certain metric that we talk about all the time, like what's a session or something like that. Like they might not even know. I helped somebody get analytics on their site the other day because they didn't even have analytics. Because I asked them, like, do you know how many people come to your website? And they're like, no clue. And I was like, all right, let's get you into Search Console. Let's get analytics on there. And now they're like, now they have questions, but I like they have to take. I can help them so far, but it's like, here's a resource to teach you what like a session is and things like that. So some of them have to like reach out on their own because I don't have unlimited time. But I'm trying to help out as much as I can locally with just helping people stay in business or at least understand. And if this business fails, they learn. And when they start another business, they'll have some more things in their pocket.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the industry have been doing a lot of that lately. And I feel like even with the smaller or more local type of businesses, even helping them with something like their Google Maps settings or updating their opening and closing hours, or even helping them integrate Shopify to their website. So it's just the simple things, and the more that we can help implement some of this stuff, the easier and more helpful it might be.
Yep.
And Jeff, you just reminded me of my father-in-law. Oh, funny story. So yes, there are many cases where small business owners are not savvy with respect to the internet. My father-in-law is one of those cases. So he owns a couple of restaurants. He's kind of a self-made man, and unfortunately, with the restaurants closing down, they've had to short staff, a lot of people cut staff, and they're moving to kind of the carryout system. So we have been trying to do, so I'll go back. I'll say one of the benefits of having a father-in-law who is a restaurant owner, and he says this himself, so I don't feel as bad, is that when we go into his restaurants in normal times, we don't usually have to pay for our dinner because he owns the restaurant. So it's just on the house. But recently, because we want to make sure that we're supporting the restaurant, supporting the people that work there, supporting the families, like we're paying. And even though he's telling us, guys, don't pay, we're basically saying, screw you, Dad. We're paying. You're taking our money, whether you like it or not. That part's neither here nor there. He's had to kind of adapt and put up temporary menus on his website. And the other day, we're trying to place a carryout order via the phone. So we had trouble navigating his website, and I don't run his website. It's run by the son-in-law of his other business partner. And we come to find out, so we did a Google search and we found what was clearly an old version of his menu. And we tried to explain it. We tried to explain it to him, and he just was not understanding until I said, Tim, just stop what you're doing. Stop arguing with me. It's there. I can see it. Google has crawled your site and they've indexed that old menu. And for whatever reason, you didn't get rid of it. So it's there. People are finding it. Just go to Google and search your restaurant name and you'll see it. I'm not lying to you. I promise. And then finally he saw it, and we had a little ha-ha moment, and he said, okay, I'm going to send that to Nate, who is the son-in-law of his business partner, and got it fixed. But it was just like, it's just that kind of crazy stuff that is just coming up now. And yeah. Can't imagine trying to navigate it without being tech savvy. Anyways, so people probably, again, as I've said, probably for the last 4 shows, aren't coming here for all of their good COVID-19 discussions. They are coming here for SEO. So one of the things I've shared is we've really surpassed our growth goal for this season. We set out a goal, and we'll share more about what that goal was. It's not an astronomical goal, but we've beat it. And we do want to thank those people that have listened. We're very excited about it. But because we are still a small show, I do want to explain for first-time listeners kind of what the basis of our show is and how it's a little bit different than a normal SEO podcast. So normal SEO podcasts, and there aren't a lot of them, but in a lot of cases, quite honestly, it's knowledge dropping the entire time. And that's not us. I don't think any of us would ever claim to be the best or the smartest SEOs in the world. I think we're pretty good at our jobs, but I would never claim to have all the knowledge. So when I was starting a podcast, in terms of trying to think about what was going to be the differentiator, I said, okay, like, I don't want to be that, nor am I trying to be that. But there's this thing about SEO where nobody really gets into it on purpose, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, because in the traditional education system, and by that I mean colleges, right? They teach digital marketing, but they don't get deep, and they don't get deep into SEO. So a lot of people that are coming out with digital marketing degrees, they don't really know that they know that SEO is a thing, but they don't come out ready to do it. And the people that have been in the industry for a long time, because that wasn't in place, are almost constantly falling into it from other places, right? Nobody intends to get into SEO. You just fall into it. So this podcast was kind of created to explore those origin stories, and not only that, to really dive deep into what it's like day to day just to be an SEO and to go through the trials and tribulations and just the overall experience. And I didn't feel like a lot of podcasts were really diving into that particular component of it. And I find that part really, really fascinating, to know that there are other people like me. And as a listener, I guess I would liken it to being like a fly on the wall when a client maybe leaves the room to hear what SEOs really talk about, right? So it's a little bit of an insider's perspective on the day-to-day life of an SEO. This season, and we're probably getting rid of this component of it, but we've added a segment to talk about SEO news. And that segment, because big news in the SEO industry seems to come kind of few and far between, and the information gets dated really pretty quickly. We're probably going to move on from that, but that decision has not been made. Jeff and I will talk after the season, but it's basically a forum for Jeff to narrate the news and me to yell about how Google's evil and all of the problems that I have with them, even though I'm dependent on Google to have a job. And then the third component of each episode is a deep dive, where we kind of just have a roundtable discussion about a predetermined topic. In today's deep dive, we're going to dive back into diversity, because I think Areej has some very poignant thoughts and experiences on that very subject. So that's the format. Nobody wants to listen to me continue to talk, and I've done a lot of talking already. So Areej, I want to kind of kick it over to you, and my hope is for you to kind of tell your story, who you are, where you come from, how you got into SEO, and just kind of take us through it.
So I'm Areej, and I'm Egyptian. I moved to the UK over 6 years ago now. And I've been doing SEO for 6 years. So I have a background in computer engineering. That's what I studied back in uni. And then afterwards, I did a master's in business IT. And that's when I kind of came across this idea of digital marketing. And for me, it was SEO just felt like that bridge between both computing and digital marketing. It was just this nice thing right in the middle. And when I first started reading about it and kind of getting into it, it just felt like something that I've always wanted to do. I've always enjoyed how different it was and how it was constantly changing. I always found that quite challenging, and I still do until now. So it doesn't get boring. It's something that's constantly exciting. And I started off agency side. I did agency side for a bit over 5 years. And now I'm client side. I work for a property aggregator site here in the UK. That's kind of a little bit about me and what I've been doing.
So what made you go from Egypt to the UK?
So I moved to do my master's degree. I got a really good scholarship in it. And I'd been to the UK for quite a few times. We were doing, back when I was a student, it was like those student exchange things where we'd go for a week and people from different countries, and it was really fun. We'd go and meet in the Forest of Dean in Gloucester for some reason. We had like a lot of retreats there. So I'd come twice back when I was a student, and I just remember loving how green the UK was. And I was convinced that all of the UK is going to look like that, but that wasn't the case afterwards. So I was always really excited about moving to the UK. And also I was a massive Harry Potter geek since I was a kid. So again, I was convinced that this is what the UK was all about. So I always had it in mind that I'd love to move here someday.
You mean there aren't just witches and wizards flying around everywhere and there's no Hogwarts?
Yeah, and I was convinced that everyone had a BBC English accent. That's what I used to call it. And then I found out no, because when I moved here, I moved to a city that's very close to Birmingham. And Birmingham, they have very, very heavy Birmingham accents that sound nothing like BBC English accents. And so that was a lie as well.
The funny thing is, one of our guests, Luke Davis, I believe episode 45, he came on, and so he moved from the UK over to the US for a little while, to Atlanta, and then he eventually moved back. But he was talking a little bit about the culture shock, and not only that, but the idea that people over there made fun of him for his accent. And then he changed it to kind of an American accent, and nobody noticed, which I found quite crazy and quite odd. But I guess being a stupid American, I guess it kind of makes sense that, of course, they wouldn't pay attention to that. What was there any sort of culture shock from you going from Egypt to the UK, or were they a lot nicer than Americans?
I think the little things that I discovered. Like, I was obsessed with pot noodles and microwavable food in my first year. That is not something we had at all in Egypt, and I couldn't believe that you could just heat up food within 30 seconds and eat it. For me, that was just completely beyond me. There wasn't anything that shocking. It just felt like home, and that's why I kind of decided to stay afterwards. I really, really like it here, other than the weather and the gloominess and how grey it can be and how much it rains. I really, really like the UK, and I think everyone here is really nice. My siblings live in the US. They've been there for quite a while. I go visit them at least once or twice a year. I like the food in the US because I feel really guilty after I eat it, but I know that I'm going to eat it temporarily, so it's okay. And I love the massive malls that you have, but I just do not picture myself living there because I don't know how to drive, and you have to drive to be able to live in the US. So I would really, really struggle.
Yeah, everything's so spread out here in the country. Like, it's so sprawling. I can't even imagine what, if you think 300 or 400 years ago when people were kind of first settling here, what they might have thought, when they come from, European countries where you can get to another country in a day. I feel like in the US, you can drive for 4 or 5 days, straight and still not make it to the other side. It's crazy. And even in city environments, you've got the core of the city, which I would say is probably very similar to, like, especially in a big city like a London, right? But then you get out to the suburbs, and everything just is so spread out that you pretty much can't get anywhere without driving because it is so spread out.
And if you get out past the suburbs into the country part, there's definitely no Uber or anything out there either.
No Uber where I grew up.
Yeah.
And I would even say probably even to this day, because obviously Uber wasn't a thing, but there were no taxis, nothing. Like, people would have looked at me. They probably would still if I went, because I come from a very, very small town in Ohio. If I went there and tried to get an Uber, the probably closest Uber would be probably Columbus, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I don't know. Small town. Anyways, so you've spent some time, a considerable amount of time on the agency side, but now you're kind of in-house. So when we have people that have done both, we always like to ask, which is your cup of tea, to use a British term. Which is your cup of tea?
So in-house is definitely less stressful, which I really need in my life right now. Agency was definitely stressful, crazy deadlines, unhappy clients, just yeah, super last minute demands. So that kind of took its toll on me. Whereas in-house, it's interesting because it kind of feels like everyone's working for the same goal, so everyone's achieving everything with one aim. My other thing with agency as well is the more senior you become, the more salesy you need to get. You need to become some form of like business development person where you're trying to pitch and you're trying to grow retainers and so forth. And that's not really something I enjoy doing very much. Whereas in-house, it's all about getting sucked in and really going into a level of detail that you're usually not able to do when you're agency. You also have access to so much more data when you're in-house, and you get to work really, really closely with your product and engineering team, which is something I really enjoy. Whereas when you're agency, sometimes you don't even get to talk to any of the engineers who might implement some of your stuff. So yeah, definitely in-house is my cup of tea. But I've only been there for about 8 months now, so my answer might change soon. But for now, it's in-house.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you just brought up every point of reasons why I ever thought to go in-house was everything you just brought up. I've always worked in an agency side, and I just feel sometimes being able to own a product, everyone working for the same goal, and actually being friends with someone else's development team and things like that, where they're not just like, get out of here, SEO. They're like, we're trying to make more money so we can all have jobs and get raises. So I think it's actually it's one of the reasons why I like it. Though I like the craziness on the agency side too. So I do sometimes like to go crazy. So
yeah, I think it's like a personality thing. And I've talked about this before with respect to me and my experiences. So I've been doing this for 14 years. And I would say 80% of that time has been in what I just generally call it agency world, because it's just like just a whole other thing and world, and it contains all of the things that you mentioned, the pressures and the different goals, and in some cases, although I would say probably both sides include a certain amount of politics that are involved, but you're navigating in agency world, you're not just navigating your own internal company politics, you're navigating the client's internal company politics. And by the way, if you've got 4 clients or 6 clients, you're doing that 6 times over, which is why implementation, I say, especially on the agency side, is always the most difficult challenge. Not just implementation, but correct and timely implementation is a tremendous challenge that you have to get over on the agency side. But where I was kind of going is I kind of feel like it really is a personality thing. And I found, being in-house a couple of times, you're right. There is nothing quite like being able to go a couple of desks over and, lean over the developer's shoulder while they implement your recommendations so that you can help them troubleshoot right on the spot. And there's nothing like diving deep, really, really deep into the data and into your work and into that particular business without having to worry about changing gears, several times a day to focus on several different clients or several different industries, right? There are a lot of pros. For me, the cons ended up being one, like if you get an in-house role where you just don't feel like you fit with the team, or like you do all the work and you get to a point where like you've taken it almost as far as you can, it can become repetitive and to some degree, in my experience, the couple of times, a little not as fast paced as I liked. I feel like we did great work, but just wasn't my cup of tea. And I do find that the challenge and sometimes the thrill of the agency lifestyle, that it just fits me a little bit better. It's not for everybody, but for me, it fits. And I find that like, depending on your personality, you can be one or the other.
I think for me, like my recommendation for people who are always starting off in SEO is to definitely go agency side initially, because the wealth of things that you learn when you're agency side, the different audits that you do and the different industries you deal with and all the different case studies that you see, you're just not going to get it if you start your SEO career in-house. Because with in-house, it's always going to be one example, one form of data, one type of auditing, one team, and so forth. Whereas with agency, you just get so much variety with that. So definitely for people starting off in SEO, I tend to recommend an agency role.
Yeah, it is good to get exposed to that, because it can be intense, but at the same time, I've found that probably there's no great way to say this. You're exposed to more cutting edge stuff because you're exposed to more industries and you're kind of forced into more things. Whereas, if you're in-house, it's just you're exposed to one client, one industry. You've got, what you have to do. It's probably not changing, super rapidly. Although I say that in the COVID-19 era where everything's changing rapidly. Yeah. So Areej, I guess, what have been some of your biggest challenges just being kind of existing as an SEO day to day?
Yeah, I think one of the things you touched on in terms of implementation. So I've had challenges with this both from an agency and an in-house perspective. I specialize as technical SEO, and that's always been the thing that I've enjoyed doing the most. And with technical SEO, it doesn't matter how amazing your analysis is or how amazing the number of recommendations you give or how on spot everything might potentially be. If things don't get implemented, then at the end of the day, it's absolutely pointless. And that's something I had a lot of problems with when I was agency side, because there's only so much you can do, and there's always a restricted amount of time in the retainer that you're allowed to give to your clients. And it always felt so slow, and other things got prioritized. And it's funny because when I moved in-house, I started realizing why a lot of that was ignored, because in-house are trying to deal with a lot of their own battles as well, and they've got tons of product features and things that they need to navigate and implement. A lot of my in-house time is actually spent helping out the product team with new features and new pages and things like that they're going to push, as opposed to here's a bunch of recommendations, here's what you need to fix type of thing. And I think when we're agency, we just don't have that insight in terms of why things are potentially slow. And for me, I feel like it took me maybe a few years to finally understand that I can't keep doing these technical SEO audits and handing over 50 recommendations to be done. It took me quite a while to understand that if you don't prioritize what needs to be done, and if you just simply go with them and dump a whole bunch of stuff, then nothing will get done. Instead, even if it's just one thing, but one really important thing that would make a difference for them in terms of their indexability or their rankings or their traffic or so on, then that's the one thing you should recommend. And then everything else can just follow after, rather than to be happy with a 50 or a 60-page audit that just goes into such depth of detail with a lot of stuff that might not be very high priority. So I think for me, that's probably been something that took me quite a while to learn. But now that I've learned it, it's making things a little bit easier, and also just kind of setting your expectations a little bit. Don't go in with super high expectations in terms of, this is a 2-month project and it's going to get turned around that quickly. That's not usually the case.
Yeah, I've found that when I go in with very aggressive expectations on how soon things will get implemented, it's especially in the case of some recommendations I've made in the past that I've been very passionate about, and not just passionate about, but passionate about the impact that I thought it was going to drive, only to see it sit on the shelf for not just months, but years. It can be a little bit soul crushing, when you're kind of in those situations. So I've found in not lowering your expectations to the floor, but just being more realistic with yourself. And I, as I think back to, those situations, I now realize maybe I was lying to myself a little bit to think that it was going to get implemented in short order and drive amazing impact. And that is a little bit of a glass half empty way of looking at it, right? You still should, have passion and deliver recommendations that you believe in, but you shouldn't let it crush you when they don't get implemented quickly.
Yeah, it takes a little bit to get used to that, because I know I've spent plenty of times where I could bet like my whole mortgage on like this thing would work and double your revenue coming into the house or coming into your site, and they don't do it. And it's one of those where you're really worried. Well, I have other clients that implement everything, which is great. So it is that balance there, and it's not necessarily you or what you're doing is why they can't implement it. It is trying to understand, and I try to get that way with my clients. Like, so what is holding us back on these? Oh, you don't have enough resources. Is there any way we can help out with that? Or sometimes it is like, hey, we have all these new product features, and if they don't get implemented, or our cart isn't working right, we have to spend all our time there. So I try to work with developers on like prioritizing and just getting it into their ticketing systems on the technical side. And when they get to it, they get to it. And just being able to have that open communication, which isn't always the case. Some clients I do, some clients I don't. And the ones that I do, I feel like we have a lot better relationship and things to get implemented. And the ones where like, not anything to do with our side, but a lot of companies are very siloed. So I might be reporting to the marketing manager who doesn't even know their dev team, or I might be reporting to, a dev team, and they don't work with their internal marketing teams, or they think marketing is paid and not SEO and things like that. So there's a lot of internal politics that you have to deal with, but some of that's fun. Like if you and your client that you report to have a good rapport, I think you can work together to get past a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think you touched on an interesting word, and it was a word that I was thinking as you guys were talking, the word relationship. And like that is often a relationship and empathy, two of the most overlooked things that need to go well in order for an SEO engagement to be successful. And I say that because there are times where if you've built a good enough relationship, not that the results don't matter, but they don't matter as much. And I'll give you an example. And I don't know if you guys feel this way as well. We've got one particular client where it has been, I've got a really, really good relationship with my client contact, and they're a really good advocate for us internally. But because of some of the challenges that the business has faced, some created by itself in terms of kind of changing business focus, changing direction, going into code freezes for long periods of time, prioritizing other things, that are important to the website but that don't have to do with SEO. There have been lots of lags on implementation. Now, when we have gotten implementation, things have worked, but I would be kidding myself if I thought that the results that we've driven had anything to do with the fact that we've got a good relationship with the client and that we're likely to continue to renew. It has nothing to do with the results. It has everything to do with the personal relationship that I've developed with my client contact. And that doesn't just, stand for this client, but imagine that, especially on the agency side, if you're developing a relationship, it might not just benefit you when your client is at the current company. They may go somewhere else, and because they like you and like the work and the honesty that you bring, they may bring you along or ask you to come in later on. So I don't know how you guys feel about relationships versus results, or like what you guys have experienced, but that's been my experience, even though results are still important, right? But if you can develop a relationship, sometimes that can even supersede results.
I think definitely when it comes to developing relationships, and that was always something that we used to think of all the time when we were agency, but actually it's the same when it comes to in-house, because especially if you have a big product and engineering team, and you tend to have different product teams split across different functionalities, it's really important to build relationships with each and every one of them. And I would say, as opposed to whether the results matter or not, it kind of feels that we are working on something towards the same goal and towards the same achievement. And that kind of helps in terms of everyone understands everyone's point of views. And I think in terms of empathy, it's really important because there might be other priorities that certain people with certain roles have. And everyone kind of feels that their recommendations or what they're working on is priority. And when you have that good relationship and the more you foster it, the more that people start understanding things from different point of views, and there's a lot of compromise that tends to happen. So yeah, I feel that it's important to spend time building relationships, but also just genuine relationships, not ones that tend to just affect. And I think with everything happening right now in the world, even if you don't work very closely with someone on a specific functionality or something for a while, just kind of checking in and making sure that you maintain that is really important. And it comes a long way. And people always remember that stuff down the line as well.
Yeah, especially now. I've said, like, on the agency side, and I think that's great advice on the in-house side. Like, don't wait for people to come to you. Go to them. Yep. Don't wait for them to ask you for an analysis. Bring them stuff. Like, go to people proactively. They will appreciate it down the line. They will remember it. That being said, so Jeff, I want to get into the news. And for those folks that had expected us to hit on the Women in Tech SEO conference and group that Areej has created, we're definitely going to talk about that. But I was purposely saving it so people listening to the episode up till now are probably like, why haven't they even touched on that? And for me, that was very purposeful. So I do want to talk about it in the deep dive because I want to get into the entire story of founding the conference and the group. And then lead that into diversity. So that's why I'm not just completely omitting it. But with that being said, Jeff, let's talk about the couple of news stories from today. Sure.
So one of the big ones that I liked was that Google came out and kind of mentioned that they've come out with a whole bunch of different guidelines for like how to make sure you mark your business as temporary closed or closed during this time. But the one thing that they mentioned in a recent tweet from the Google My Business Twitter account was that marking your business as closed or temporary closed will not affect your search rankings. So I think what was happening is that people were afraid to mark their stores closed or temporary closed because they're thinking Google would take them out of the search fields. And I would have that same thought if I was a small business owner. So Google has kind of mentioned it. It wasn't really an article based on it, but they just said, keep customers updated on your status without affecting your search rankings. And then they linked to an article that was just like how to mark your business closed, which I think we talked about last week on that side. But that was actually one I thought was great that Google's coming through and kind of saying that, we're in a tough time here. And we know, like, again, I was trying to help small business. I think we're all trying to help in our way. And this is, I think a way where Google traditionally might have hurt your rankings through an algorithm that they aren't now.
Yeah, Google finally not being evil.
Yeah. I personally think Google's been doing such a good job. I mean, their search team has been super responsive. A lot of people have had a lot of questions with what's happening right now. All the guides that they put out with the new structured markup as well, just super quick, super responsive, really, really helpful for the industry. And a lot of knowledge sharing happening as well. I know that Martin's doing a lot of JavaScript sessions. They're doing a whole bunch of new Q&As. So just generally super responsive, super helpful. And just, I personally find it, I think we're quite lucky generally as an industry to be getting a lot of this support and a lot of questions just being answered directly from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, and I think they have been awesome.
Yeah, John Mueller and Martin Splitt, Page 2 podcast alum, by the way, have been incredible. Like in even outside of what's going on now, they're just generally, I've never met John. We've met Martin. They seem just like incredibly nice human beings that go out of their way to help the industry. So when I do kind of joke about Google being evil, it has nothing to do with John and Martin and even Gary. Like, those guys are incredible mouthpieces for the company who go out of their way all the time to help people out. So some of the other stuff that goes on at Google that you hear about, not so great, but in this case, Google's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, they've been awesome, and that kind of goes in the second part of my news, which we kind of touched on too. But they have been updating a lot of the schema guidelines and structured data guidelines for COVID in general, or just different ways that we can handle our business. And some of the examples of the special announcements they put out on there are the announcement of shelter-in-place directives, closure notices, quarantine guidelines, travel restrictions, disease spread statistics and maps. Like, they have structured data around that now. So there are a ton of new things out there because this happens so quick. I mean, it's interesting when people say like, oh, like this government is really botching it. Like, it's really hard to steer a ship that big to change. And I think Google's web team has been doing a great job of implementing new things, teaching us the right way to do it. And then maybe like some of that is like building new code examples and building new schema to push live, that saying that they'll understand this because they want to, their goal is to get the best information out there. And, we want to help them get that information out there at the same time. So if we can structure our stuff for them, they actually really, it really will benefit some people.
Yeah, and I think it's been quite good how detailed a lot of their documentation has been as well. So it's not being built in a way where, oh, you need a developer in order to be able to implement some of this stuff. A lot of it is very, very inclusive and very easy to follow along. So a lot of effort has been put into it. And also, but I don't want to curse anything, but I have a feeling that they're not going to be releasing an algorithm update anytime soon to be nice to everyone. I have a feeling, because usually you get one around this time of the year in March, but this time we didn't get one. I'm not going to curse anything, but I have a feeling that they're putting that stuff on hold for a bit.
Is it like when they put it on hold over the Christmas holidays too?
I honestly, I really think so. But that means that when things go back to normal, we're probably going to get hit by a whole bunch of stuff in a row. But it's okay. We don't need to worry about that for now.
Yeah, it'll be like when the economy is going to drop so low that it's going to have nowhere to go but up. So it's going to come probably roaring back when people are allowed out of their houses again. And it's going to be the same thing, I feel like, with Google search. Like, our world is getting flipped on its head, and it's going to get flipped on its head probably again when we come out of this.
Yeah,
but we're used to it. We're SEOs. We're nothing if not adaptable.
Yep.
Agreed. And yeah, Martin, I would recommend. I started watching a couple of them. I want to get more into them, but Martin Split definitely. He's been doing these, which I'm not big on Twitch. I just like kind of have an account just to sometimes like to watch some things on there. So I haven't actually really gotten into his videos that much. But I do have it bookmarked, and I keep it in like a tab all the time, just because it's like whenever I get a chance, I'm going to watch another one. But he's giving out a ton of information on just like JavaScript and SEO and things like that. Google also released out their webmaster, I think it was like a conference that they had, a lot of the videos from there, which was pretty good. So Google's definitely stepping up, giving out tons of information and trying to help everyone in this time of need.
Yep.
And then the last news story kind of makes me chuckle a little bit, but it's because my wife is really big into watching The Tiger King. And it's a new Netflix show about a guy who has a couple guys that have too many tigers as pets. But during one of the episodes, there was towards the end of it, they actually had a little story there where if you haven't watched The Tiger King, I'm not going to try to drop any spoilers, though it's all publicly documented stuff that's out there. But there was one business called Big Cat Rescue, which tried to rescue all the tigers in there, and one of the guys who owned the tiger shop changed his entertainment company to Big Cat Rescue Entertainment. to be able to steal some of her search rankings, because he was mad that anyone who was looking to have like a tiger education or have a tiger to come onto your set for a movie, she was showing up number one because she had good SEO. So he just tried to steal her company name to get SEO, and it worked. He was actually doing really well with a lot of that stuff until she sued him for $1 million or so. And I believe she won that lawsuit there. But there was a whole article in Search Engine Land about it that kind of made me chuckle. But it was also, one, because it's, to me, a ridiculous show. But at the same time, they talked about SEO in it, which I was like, all right, now you got my attention. Has anyone watched The Tiger King?
I did. I binged it last weekend, and that bit made me laugh so hard. And I was watching it with my husband, and my husband knows what I do, but he's not really convinced SEO is such a thing. And I was like, and he was like, "Oh, that's what you do." And I was like, "Yes, see, that's exactly what I do." And honestly, I think moving forward, any potential clients, anything like that, all you have to do is just explain to them that bit. The way he explained it on Tiger King was perfect. He summarized it so well. That's exactly what SEO is.
Yeah, he's like, she was the first choice every time, so he wanted to take some of their stuff. So it was kind of an interesting conversation.
I never thought SEO would make the connection with Tiger King, but then I would also say, like, I never knew Tiger King was a thing until about maybe, like, I don't know, a few days ago, when I had to ask my wife, what is Tiger King, and she finally told me. So I'm not hip with what it. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I watched about half of it, and like my wife watched the whole series, so I kept, every time me and her would hang out, she'd have it on. So, but then she got so into it that she had to sneak them without me. So,
did you get mad at her when she did?
No, I didn't. I think the characters in there are, I know they're real, but I just don't like. They have to be fictional, right? These people actually exist in the world. So.
All of the pictures, and I don't know if they're real, because basically, like, what I've seen happening is everybody superimposing different people's faces on this guy's face. Like, I think there was a Trump one, there was I think an O.J. Simpson one. There's been a bunch. The Tiger Woods one, Tiger King, Tiger Woods, which I thought was probably the most logical connection. But yeah, it's been insane, and the only thing I can ever think of when I've thought about the premise is, like, for whatever reason, I'm making the connection to Dog the Bounty Hunter, and you guys will have to tell me, like, am I, like, super far off in terms of, like, maybe that's the type of person that the Tiger King people are? Or I don't know. I that's
Could
what I
think of. I just think if you own 200 tigers, like, as pets, you're just a little off. I mean, whether 200? It's 270 something.
How is that even legally allowed?
It's not. That's part of the show too. So, but he would breed them.
I just have to watch.
Yeah, he would breed them and sell them. So,
who's buying tigers?
Mike Tyson? I don't know.
Again, this is all part of the show. Probably, I just need to watch and stop.
Exactly. Now I get into it.
Right. Okay.
Cool. But that's really what I had in for the news.
Oh. Jeff, there was another, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through the article, but Patrick Stocks, another Page 2 podcast alum, wrote a really, really great page speed article for Ahrefs, or just Ahrefs as the hip folks call it. Really, really good piece of. It's very technical. So if you're a technical SEO, you're going to love it. If you're not a technical SEO, it's probably going to be a rough article for you. But I would recommend reading it. Really good article.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through that one too. That's my other tab that's open 24/7 right now.
It's a book, basically. Anyways,
it is.
Let's move into the deep dive. And as I mentioned before, today's episode, we're gonna dive back into the subject of diversity. And I was telling Areej, or we were telling Areej before we jumped on, like, Jeff and I, we did talk about this a couple of weeks ago, and we come at it from a position of, we realize that we are very privileged. We're both 30-year-old and 40-year-old, that age range, white dudes. So, like, I can't even think of a time when I've experienced any level of discrimination of any kind. So the perspective that I'm taking is just from stuff that I've seen from, and I don't even want to say the outside looking in, the inside looking out probably is the better way to describe it. So Areej, we're really gonna rely on your perspective heavily here. And not only that, I would love for you to tell the story of how you founded and why you founded the Women in Tech SEO group and how it became a conference.
Yeah, so last year at around this time, I would say, I put a tweet out offering to help out any women who are starting out in SEO, who just needed any kind of support or any form of guidance. I just set up like a Calendly thing where I would dedicate a few hours of my week in having these calls. And the main reason I've really done that is that I'm very privileged that I had a lot of women in my career who helped me a lot and who inspired me a lot. And so I just wanted to give back. And it was quite interesting because I did, I don't remember how many, maybe 30, 40 calls. And even though the audience, it was dedicated for people who were starting off in SEO, a lot of the people who signed up for the calls were ones who were actually quite experienced and knowledgeable and have been doing it for quite a while, but felt very overwhelmed and felt that they were just not good enough, or they were not technical enough, or that they just weren't quite sure how they could be promoted, and so forth. So that just got me thinking that it would be quite good to have a community where we can all support one another. And so in May of last year, I started the Women in Tech SEO community. And initially it was just a Facebook group, but I had 100 people join in the first week, which I was not expecting at all, because all I'd done was just tweet out about it. And then afterwards, I thought, well, it would be quite nice if we could all come together in one place. And that's when I started the London meetups. And so the plan was to have a monthly London meetup where we'd only have women speakers and women attendees. And we'd encourage a lot of first-time speakers. So that's how it kind of all started. So it's almost a year now this May. Our Facebook group is almost 1,000 people. I think we're at like 980. We've got a Slack community now, which hosts a lot of virtual meetups. That's around 600 people. And we hosted, since last June, we hosted monthly London meetups. And then, this March, we hosted our first full-day conference, which was amazing. Got sold out, 250 people attended, and we had 11 speakers.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does it feel like to be the leader of such a powerful conference? And not only that, like to be able to have probably been the last big SEO conference to have snuck in before all of the COVID-19 stuff kind of hit.
I'm so lucky. You have no idea. I was so stressed out because it all, like, the conference was on Friday, March 6th. And then the Monday right before that, things really started. A lot of people were starting to get worried. It was starting to get quite bad in Italy. And I was like, oh my God, is this thing going to get cancelled? It cannot get cancelled. And then we literally just scraped by because everything afterwards started getting cancelled. And literally it was another week or two when things started getting really bad. So I am really, really, really lucky that we managed to go ahead as planned. And it was such a wonderful day. Like everything, of course, in my mind, I had visualized every possible worst case scenario, but none of it happened. And everything went really, really well.
So are you going to do it again next year?
I'd love to. The night before it, everyone asked, and I was like, nope. We had like a speaker's dinner, and they're like, so are you going to do it again next year? I was like, never. I am never doing this again. I'm never going to put myself through this again. The level of stress. But then the day just went so well that I was like, okay, I guess I should do this again.
Yeah.
The guys from Traffic Think Tank, so we've had Nick Eubanks and Ian Howells on, and they do Traffic Think Tank Live, and they shared, I feel like, a very similar experience to you. And one of the pieces of advice that they gave was to actually like work with an event planner who's the one that has all of the connections already. And yeah, so he's
thought of everything.
Had a similar experience.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I had to plan everything from the start. I started planning it in August and the conference was in March, and I overthought every little tiny detail. And I was really bad at asking for help, which I'm not going to do the second time around. I'm definitely going to ask for help. And it was just most of my evenings and weekends, and yeah, it took up a lot of time, but I'm really, really glad I put it together. It went really well.
So let me ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges facing women from I don't know, just an existing within the SEO industry standpoint?
I think for me, just one of the first things that I noticed right away was every time I attended a conference, the technical SEO room or the technical SEO sessions, it lacked women. There weren't women there. And then generally when you start looking at speaker lineups in our industry, they're never 50-50. They're always far away from it. Just the other day, and I'm not going to name, but there was a series of webinars that got announced and it looked really, really exciting. But I opened the website and there were 3 women and 40 men. And I was like, but why? Why, when I have a community that has 1,000 global women in it? It means there are people out there, there are women who are in technical SEO, but for some reason, they don't get thought of, they don't get prioritized, they don't get invited. And also, even within their companies and within their roles, they don't get promoted as well. They tend to stay within that, whether they reach that middle management level, and then they kind of stop at that. So yeah, I think as an industry, there's still a lot that needs to be done. But I feel like having this community or having different initiatives in different companies helps a lot. Because what's starting to happen now is I do get a lot of people getting in touch with me, event organizers, asking, we're putting this together and we need some recommendations, who might be interested. So I feel like having that in the forefront of people and knowing that communities like that exist where you can go, you can reach out and you can see who can speak in your events or who can write a blog on your website or so forth, then you have an area or you have a place where you can reach out for people rather than just go with what's familiar, basically.
I think that when you look at the tech side of just not just SEO, but the tech side of just tech, it is very male dominated. And I think that is changing, but I don't think, at least from my opinion, I don't see it as being purposeful in a lot of ways. I think some people have maybe different interests and stuff like that, but I was kind of lucky in my career where I have had like most positions I was at up till like now where like I had someone as a woman or someone of a minority as either like a director above me or ran like the whole department or actually ran the company. So I think as I was going up and there was a lot of like Twitter, drama and things like that going on. Like I don't ever, not that I don't ever see it. Maybe it's like I'm not looking for it, but I don't see like there was a ton of just Twitter comments that were going out there about like certain types of conferences and things. But I guess when I go to a conference, like I go there, I watch the presentations, and then I usually maybe like go through the expo halls or something like that, and then I'm like out. So maybe I'm there at after hours hanging out and seeing things like that. But I would agree that when you look on stage, there is like a one type of person up there. And as someone like I don't really speak at conferences. I don't even go to many conferences anymore. But I really like think about that, and I'm like, yeah, why aren't there more people in there? Because I've worked with such amazing people. And whether it was technical or like I work on SEO teams where I might be the technical person, but the person that's leading the strategy or leading, content strategy is, would be a female or something like that. So it's one of those where I feel like in the conference circuit that it is like one-sided for some reason. And I don't know if it's just because of confidence or if it is systematic, because I don't know people who throw conferences. You're actually one of the first people I met that threw a conference. So it's definitely important to have that out there too. How do you handle like, I guess the opposite side of that, right? Where it's like you have an all-woman conference, and I have seen you post things where you have, those arrogant guys going, oh, if we had an all men in SEO conference, we'd be, you'd be up in arms. But, having all women or someone, I think you posted someone who acted like he was a girl to get into your group and then like turned around or did something like that. Like, how do you handle that aspect when you're trying to kind of be a different group than what that's out there, and then the people that are negative towards it?
Yeah, I mean, with the community itself, it was fine. We didn't really get much backlash or any issues. But when I announced the conference, definitely faced some backlash then. I had a bunch of people tell me that this was illegal to have a conference with paid tickets that was only for women and that this was discriminatory. So that was interesting to have to deal with. I think some people believe that there isn't much of a purpose behind all women communities. They think it's pointless, and that's fine. Like some people might feel that way. I feel the complete opposite. Personally, I've always been very inspired and very motivated from all women communities. And a lot of the women we do have in the community have said the same. It's interesting because it's even to the extent that some of the talks that our first-time speakers present in some of these meetups, they feel much more comfortable presenting it to a safe environment. And they feel, for them, it's kind of like the first step in order to then go and, take on like a bigger stage or a bigger conference or so forth. So yeah, people are going to have different perspectives on it, but I personally believe that like we need all women spaces in order to help with confidence and to just raise that level of awareness.
I was going to say, I find it funny, like basically the situation is now, like what we're saying is basically conferences are almost like all men, or at least in terms of the people that are getting the most publicity, it's like slanted 75% or more towards the male gender. So like, come on, people, what is wrong with people? Why would somebody take the time to do that? Life is too short to do that type of crap.
Weird.
I don't understand. But what I would say, like, again, from the inside looking out, I know for a fact that everywhere that I've worked at agency side, when I've been in-house, I've been part of really, really small teams. So it wasn't really as noticeable. But when I've been agency side working with larger SEO teams, it's been 80% maybe, if I had to put a number to it, 80% men versus women. And not only that, like when it comes to the distribution of the roles, when you're thinking of just like your intro roles and your mid-manager and then like your director roles, honestly, most of the directors have been men. And I've always wondered why that is. And I do remember, when I first started at an agency back in 2011, there was a really badass woman. And Jeff, you know her, Allison Dooley, who used to be an SEO director. And she's not well known, but she was a badass, like just certifiable badass, great leader, very knowledgeable. But she was the only one. And when she left, there just was nobody else on the female side of things there, and it was just all men, and it was actually a little depressing. And I know for a fact that the people who were kind of coming up during that time at that agency, like the people being the women, like it was a problem for them, and for me, it was very difficult to like know what to say to them in terms of like what I could do to help fix the situation, other than to help try to make their contributions more known and make people in positions to do the things that they needed to do to help people, move up the ranks and get promoted, kind of be an enabler for the women that I worked with and really kind of push their contributions forward. And that was the only thing that I knew how to do. But Areej, I would ask you, for people that are in a position to pull strings, or for people that are maybe not in a position to pull strings, so to speak, to help people out directly, but indirectly, like maybe myself and Jeff, like what advice would you give to us to make sure that there was more equal representation?
I think the next time someone gets asked to judge an award, speak in a conference, write a blog post for a search engine journal, the first thing they should ask is what's the split? What's the gender split look like? What's the diversity split look like? Who else have you been in touch with? Before you just jump in and say yes. if this is something you've done so many times before that you don't really need it, suggest someone else instead of you. Suggest your colleague who hasn't had much of an opportunity before, but you know that she's just as good and she would do a really, really good job. So start doing that rather than taking on all the opportunities, and just call these things out. I feel like if it's just us, like if it's just women who go and ask, how come the lineup looks like this, or so forth, then that will make it quite difficult. If we are all allies and if we all help one another with this, then it makes a massive, massive difference.
That is some excellent advice. And you're right. There are a lot of people. I just call it the SEO conference circuit. There are some people that are on the circuit and have been on the circuit for a while that I'm sure could definitely make those types of suggestions. And as for myself, I don't speak very much either, and I don't really have the hankering to go out and do a lot of public speaking. But I know on our show, which is basically our public speaking forum, balance has been a big, not something that we've promoted, but it's been a big behind the scenes consideration, because we want perspectives from all different walks of life. So that has been a big focus for us. So Jeff, did you want to kind of close out the episode and ask our final question?
So we asked this question of everybody who comes on the show, and it is, if you were getting into SEO today, what kind of advice would you give to someone who is brand new to the industry? So not you getting into SEO, someone was coming into SEO and they asked you for advice. What would be that one piece of advice that you would give them?
Implementation, to really, really, really focus on that. And yeah, I think it just goes back to what we were talking about initially in terms of, even if you have to recommend that one thing that makes a massive difference, go with that. So just always go with quality and importance of something being done, as opposed to, just let's dump a whole bunch of stuff in one go. And just patience, because things take a very, very long time, and to be kind to yourself when things get difficult. So yeah, a bit of those three, I would say.
Patience is a virtue, and that is one of my worst qualities, especially in work. So that is something that I constantly have to tell myself, even 14 years in. Patience is a virtue. So Areej, and there's my little meeting ticker. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for being willing to talk about what can, in my opinion, be kind of a tough subject in diversity. We probably didn't get to dive as deep as maybe we would have liked, or we could. We probably could talk about it for hours, but even so, I would just say thank you for your contributions to the industry, and for creating such an awesome group. So I think from our show, we would just say thank you. We think it's really great.
Yeah, thank you. And it was really, really good to be hosted today. So yeah, thanks for taking the time, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Page 2 podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the show or listen to more episodes, visit us at page2podcast.fm. That's page, the number 2, podcast.fm. Our episodes are also available on a number of other platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Deezer, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Additionally, you can also listen to our show on our new YouTube channel. If you'd like to become a sponsor or would like to be interviewed, get in touch with us at thepage2podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy optimizing.